Welcome everybody to April 15th. This is our MPO meeting. Hopefully our last virtual meeting, or at least do a hybrid maybe the next time, but we can talk about that later. But we'll call this meeting to order and need a vote on the approval of the agenda, please.
So moved, McCoy.
Second, Reba.
Excellent. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 3 is an approval of the meeting minutes from the February 18th. Thanks, Ruth. Is there a second?
Second,
Second.
McCoy.
Did you get that, Tracy? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 4 is consent and vote on the approval of the financial statement. Todd?
They want to put it in a better format, but just kind of some key accounts, the Minnesota and Wisconsin OPEB strategies, and then the SMA kind of.
Somebody might want to mute theirs because I keep getting a lot of feedback from somebody's mics open. Todd, did you want to talk a little bit about the financial statement? Maybe Todd got cut off.
He might have. I can do that if you'd like, Joe. We have
Sure.
the February and the March financial statements, pretty much just normal transactions for February and for March. We recommend approval.
Yeah, sorry
Thanks,
about
Tracy.
that.
Oh, you're fine. Anyone have any questions for Todd about the financial statement? Any comments? All right, I did. Thanks, Ruth.
Second, Reba.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 5 is public comment on any MPO actions. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak at this time? I don't think we have anybody on, do we, Todd?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right. We will move on to item number 6 is a report and vote on the federal fiscal year 2025 surface transportation block grant program funding recommendation from Zach. I think you're going to give us a quick overview of it. Maybe.
You unmute that. Unmute. Well, we'll go ahead. The STBG program, we had about 13 million, a little less than 13 million available. It was a big year on requests. We had over $39 million in requests. So the committee had its work cut out for it on allocating the funds. I won't read all these individually, but we had a number of system capacity projects. You can see that Ankeny, Clive, and Des Moines and Grimes were awarded funding. Next slide. Under major reconstruction replacement, Altoona, Polk City, Urbandale, West Des Moines, and Windsor Heights each received some funding for their projects. Next. System optimization, there was only one project that applied for that, and that was the Des Moines ITS upgrade, phase 5. And then our bridge program had 3 projects that were submitted for it. They were all awarded funding. Next slide. Did DART request 1.3 million, and then the TMA funding that comes to the MPO for planning activities of 95,000. We'd be recommending approval of those amounts. Here's the categories, how we have our targets that we set during the long-range transportation process. And then on the second from the right column, the awarded amount in each of those categories and the percentages that were actual awards. We were fairly close to the targets. Kind of the one we missed was on the system optimization. Again, we only had one project. And then system capacity, we were a little high on that one, but again, part of that was the nature of the projects that were submitted. Otherwise, we're pretty close to our targets that we wanted to shoot at. So
Thank you, Todd. Any comments or questions for Todd? All right. This is a voting item, so we'll need a motion.
Hey,
Moved by
Joe,
Haddon.
second by Gare. I guess, Todd, this came through executive committee as well.
Yeah.
I guess I'd recommend on these staff recommendation sheets, if something comes through the executive committee, shouldn't we show that as well?
Okay. Yeah, these were approved by the executive committee.
Yeah, I mean, it says recommend approval of the funding subcommittee recommendation. It seems like we also auto include in the executive committee's recommendation, so the
Sure.
full policy board knows that the exec looked at it as well.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
All right, that's my second, Joe.
That's part of the motion that will include that as part of the motion.
Yeah, and going forward, there's a couple other items here, so maybe starting with the next policy agenda, we just always include the executive committee
Yeah.
on those items.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 7 is report and vote, federal fiscal year 2020 excessive surface transportation block grant program funding recommendation. Zach, I think you'll give us an update on that if you're on. If not, Todd,
Yes.
you can handle that.
No, I'm here. So the committee reviewed the excess STBG funding that was available for federal fiscal year 2020. Staff reviewed this based on our excess funding policy that was adopted by the executive committee and the policy committee about 2 years ago now. Next slide, please. So we reviewed what we had for excess funding based on that policy, based on what the Iowa DOT sent us back in early February. What we determined is there was about $500,000 in excess STBG funding available for federal fiscal year 2020. Based on the policy that we have in place, staff provided the funding subcommittee with a list of projects from the current TIP, the last 3 years of the current TIP, and allowed the funding subcommittee to review those projects and make a recommendation for how to allocate that $500,000. Ultimately, the funding subcommittee recommended that we award the $500,000 to the City of Des Moines Intelligent Transportation System Project. We presented this to the executive committee last week, and they recommended approval of that project as well. So that is what we have before policy today, is the recommendation to approve that excess funding to the City of Des Moines project. If you have any questions about it, I'd be happy to take them at this time. Otherwise, it's before you for your approval.
This is Marquita. I would move approval.
Second.
Is that Haddon second?
Yes.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes.
Sure,
Item number
Joe, I think we jumped ahead. I skipped an item here on my slides, so I'm going to jump back to the. Did we forget to do the block grant?
No, we did that.
Okay.
I think we're on item number 8. I don't think I missed anything
No, you
unless
didn't.
my agenda's wrong.
No, we're good.
So item number 8 is report and vote on federal fiscal year 2025 surface transportation block grant set aside TAP program funding recommendation. Saroshi, I believe, is going to give us an update on that.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll give you a report on the recommendation on the STBG set aside or TAP funding. So the funding target for fiscal year 2025 was about $1.1 million. And as you all recall, 20% of that was set aside for this funding cycle for Safe Routes to School projects, which amounts to about $232,800. We received a total of 6 applications, 2 of which were Safe Routes to School projects, and the total ask was about $2.5 million. Next slide. So the table here is shows the projects, the sponsors, as well as the funding amount requested. And on the right-hand side, the very last column, you can see the funding amounts recommended for
No, I'm just working
each of
on
the
MPO stuff.
each of the projects. I won't read each the amounts for each of the individual projects, but the 4 projects on the top by Des Moines, Ankeny, Polk County, and Altoona were general bike and pedestrian projects, and the 2 at the bottom are the city of Norwalk and Waukee that submitted Safe Routes to School projects. So the funding subcommittee made a recommendation for the funding award amounts, and the exec committee reviewed this last week and recommended approval as well. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them at this time. Otherwise, we are seeking approval from you for the TAP funding awards. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Item number 8.
I'd move it. McCoy.
Second. Randall.
Thanks, Ruth. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 9 is report and vote on the priority project list for the annual DC trip. Zach, I think you're going to cover this one.
Yes. So staff has been working over the last few months to develop the annual priority project list that the partnership will take with them on their trip to DC. We reviewed this list with the funding subcommittee back on their meeting on March 31st. They recommended that the list move forward. We included the full list in the agenda packet. I believe it begins on page 16. There's 2 different pages there, but it outlines all the projects that were submitted to us for this list. The majority of them are ones that were updated by committees that have been on the list in the past. There are a few additional new ones on there. I would note that in our discussions with the funding subcommittee, they felt that in the light of the fact that we're looking at a situation where earmarks or something like earmarks are coming back, that in the future we might want to review this list a little more closely. You know, for a while now, this list has just kind of been something that we take to the DC trip, but there weren't really any earmarks for funding to go to. So I think the committee felt like now that there is potential funding out there, that in the future we might need to kind of review and revise how we look at this priority list. So we'll be looking into that in the coming year, preparing for the next trip. But as far as this list goes, they did approve the list as it is in the agenda. We presented this to the executive committee and they also approved it as it appears in the agenda. So if you have any questions about the priority project list, I'd be happy to take them at this time. Otherwise, this item is before you for your approval.
Any questions for Zach or comments?
Yeah, Zach, this Ruth. I'm assuming if approved, you will send that update to the Government Policy Committee document that's going from the partnership, right?
Yes, I've got an email to Andrea queued up, just waiting.
Okay, cool, thanks.
I'll move approval. This is Marquita.
I'll second. This Frank County.
Excellent. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 10 is report and vote, the draft public participation plan and language assistant plan. Gunnar, I think you're going to run through this.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're bringing this back to you today. We are updating 2 important documents for the MPO, these being the Public Participation Plan and Language Assistance Plan. These help us meet all the regulatory requirements placed upon us, such as Title VI, environmental justice, open meeting laws, etc. The Public Participation Plan defines our process to provide citizens, stakeholder groups, and other interested parties with reasonable opportunities to be involved in the transportation planning processes. Some of the updates here were to add sections on the actions for the pandemic period, updates on current practices, as well as reviewing our media outlets to make sure that we're reaching diverse audiences. The Language Assistance Plan defines the process by which we ensure access to those who may not speak English as a primary language. Updates here include making sure that our environmental justice maps are updated and that the data on languages spoken at home are up to date. We did add some language to the website highlighting translation services for a few new languages, Polish, Russian, Arabic, new to our website anyway. We did ask for public comment. We extended that comment period through April 15. We did hold a virtual public meeting via Zoom. No one attended that, but we did receive a handful of comments by other means. We received one comment from a Des Moines resident, some comments from an MPO member of government, as well as from the Iowa DOT. Highlights of those were to extend our comment period, consider some public-facing Zoom links, the use of online calendars, et cetera. I'll let you read the rest of those yourself here. One interesting one was to consider a diversity and inclusion roundtable. Since then, and this morning I sent you updated versions of the documents, or at least the public participation plan. The language assistance plan, there were no changes since you saw it last month. As for the public participation plan, we added quite a bit of language to it. Mostly those are just detailed descriptions of the planning processes, but those processes are substantively the same as initially drafted. So no real big shifts in how we approach the planning process. There's other comments that we're considering but are not reflected in the document update, such as the diversity and inclusion roundtable. That was an item for more discussion. And then a suggestion to provide subscription options for notices. That's a technology update that we would have to look into more closely. But that's the highlights of the documents. You're provided with a red line version. And at this time, I'd ask for any questions.
Any questions for Gunnar? Comments? I hear none, Gunnar. So I would look for this is a voting item, so I need a motion.
Motion, Reba.
Second, Boson.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 11 is report on the salary and compensation review matrix.
Yep. Thank you, Joe. Go to the next slide. During the review that was held for my position, the review committee recommended that a salary review matrix be developed for all future staff reviews, not just the executive directors, but for all staff. We had a system in place, but time to look at updating it and make it all inclusive for all staff. So we've developed a matrix and wanted to share that with you. We looked at a couple different groups. Go ahead to the next slide. Surveyed some of our compatriots over in Omaha and Kansas City on what they did. We also looked at the city of Ankeny and Des Moines, Polk County and Urbandale, and a smattering of others, but those were the ones we looked at in most detail. Also looked at how Ted Weaver had offered some of what the city of Clive has done. So we incorporated parts of that. In your agenda packet is the salary comparison table and positions that we used for that comparison. That's on page 20 and 21. Next slide, I believe. So we did that comparison on the positions against what our staff is, and then developed a salary schedule on that. And then we did a performance matrix along those same lines of what the city of Clive has done, but tweaked it a little bit. We'll be using that for our staff going forward. Based on your approval next month, this will be an approval item for next month. Compensation will be based on performance score compared to the current wage, and have a percent of maximum salary for the position. A COLA will also be included in this calculation. We haven't done that previously, and we'll use a composite consumer price index to develop that. I don't know if there's one more or not, Gunnar. So we'll bring more detail about that, but you can look at it in your packet. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Appreciate you doing this. And does anyone have any questions or comments? So Todd, remind me again when we're actually supposed to do your review, because I think that we've been like 9 months late every time. So when we typically would like to have it done?
It would be great to get it done sometime this summer. And we'll do all the staffs in June so that it'll take effect in July. I don't know if we can get, a committee together and everything for mine by that same time period, but if it's within those few months, that'd be great.
Okay. So I'd be happy to take some volunteers that would be in charge of that and move forward. Looks like we've got kind of some criteria set up this time. Hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to do this time than it was last time. Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to item number 12 is a report on congressional funding opportunities. That's the earmarks. And Dylan, you briefly touched on it, but we're going to let you tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so since we've spoken last time, this has become a little bit more clear. Basically, the House of Representatives has agreed to bring back earmarks in a limited fashion. And there's two processes going on right now that communities can apply for. So the first one is community funding projects is the name of it. And this essentially is for annual appropriations bills, not just for the Department of Transportation, but for all departments and funding programs. Within this, there's a little bit of limitations to it. Each member of Congress is able to submit onto the appropriators 10 projects from their district. So there's a maximum of 10 projects across all those funding programs. We've heard from, in this case, Representative Axney's staff that those awards will probably be pretty small, under $1 million, probably 6 figures for that. Those applications are due tomorrow, so April 16th. After that one was announced, there was a separate program that came out that's similar, but has a lot of important differences. And it's called, they're referring to it as member-directed funding. This is specifically for transportation reauthorization. So at the end of September is when the current transportation bill, the FAST Act, expires or is set to expire. And so they're working on the new update to that bill, and they're taking project requests for that. Unlike the other one, there is no limit to the number of projects that a member can submit. And Congresswoman Axey's staff has told us they will submit everything that they receive from communities. Also, unlike the other one that is kind of small in the project amounts, they're being told by the committees in charge of this that they're going to try to get somewhere between $15 and $20 million to each congressional district in transportation projects. So that just gives you a scale of what they're looking at. That application period is due on Monday. I believe that's the 19th. So both of these are coming up quickly. We have been working over the last week to help communities with this. For both of these, as they relate to transportation projects, having them in the TIP is a leg up on this. They really want them to be in the TIP. So for any projects that communities in our area were interested in, we've been putting them in the TIP. And according to guidance from the DOT, those can be added as illustrative projects, similar to what we do with the long range plan, where there's no federal funding attached to them. They're just in there sort of as a, FYI in case money becomes available. So we've been doing that this week and helping communities however we can. There's a list of projects, maybe a dozen or so projects that we're aware of that are going for this or one of these two programs. In terms of timing, at least for the reauthorization bill, the committees chairs for both the House and the Senate committees that are working on this said they want to have something advanced out of their committees by Memorial Day or end of May. So that just gives you a sense of maybe how quickly something could happen, though oftentimes when reauthorization happens, it takes a few tries before it gets done, and there's a few continuing resolutions, in which case there probably won't be any projects at that time. It would wait until the final bill. So that's a lot of information. Hopefully this isn't a surprise to any communities. We've been trying to let you, keep you abreast of what's going on here. But this is kind of a new thing. It hasn't happened in about 10 years that earmarks have been available. So it's kind of new for everybody. Thank you, Gunnar. Up here on the screen, these are the projects that we're aware of right now. We've asked communities to let us know if they plan on submitting. So this is what we're aware of. Like I said, some of these had to be added into the TIP. Some were already in there. But just FYI, in case you're curious, what projects are seeking this opportunity. And that's all I have. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Dylan, this is Ruth. We may have another project. So when a community sends a project in, does the Congressional office determine the category? Because one of ours is transportation, one is not.
For the appropriations type bill, the community funding projects, I think that they will help you with that. Yeah. Because right now the application asks you to select that, and it might fall into a bunch of different categories. So I would say if you're unsure, work with their staff and they can help you with that.
Yeah, I've had a conversation and it's a bit confusing because they actually told us, since our transportation one is smaller, we should submit both for both, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's still the process that they want.
Okay. I'm happy to talk with you and help you figure that out.
Okay.
Thanks, Dylan. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you. We'll move on to item 13 is a report on the Economic Development District update from, I believe, Todd.
Yeah, I'll kick it off, and then Gunnar will carry most of the presentation. We've been working on this for a few months now from direction from the policy committee, and made a lot of progress. And we're into phase 2 and making some pretty good progress. So Gunnar, go ahead.
Good afternoon again, everyone. Again, we just want to keep you abreast of progress being made on this. As Todd mentioned, we spent a considerable amount of time over the past several months weighing support for it. And we were pleased to be able to report last month that all 7 counties in the region have unanimously expressed support for its creation. That just gives us the green light to create it, which is what we're at in phase 2, is the creation of this new entity that will become the EDD. And then phase 3 will be submitting for designations to be designated as a district. And then finally, we hope to be fully operational by mid-2022. So I'm going to dive in a little bit on phase 2 so you all know where we're at in the process. We've mapped out what we see happening over the next 5 months. April, we're working on forming a steering committee and conducting a SWOT analysis. In May, we're looking to do some goal setting with stakeholders. And in June, we'll be looking to do project selection. These are projects that will be included in the SEDS, much like projects are included in our long-range transportation plan. In July, we'll review and revise the draft document. And in August, our hope is to be able to finalize and submit that document. All this is being done with an eye toward the timeline. Our goal is to open up this federal funding pipeline, so to speak, as soon as possible. The SEDS steering committee, this is really to oversee the planning document, similar to the steering committee that we formed for the long-range transportation plan. Looking to pull 5 representatives from each of the 7 eligible counties with the goal of having representation from public and private interests. And we're asking each county to self-select representatives from within their counties. Next steps, we've been meeting with key points of contact within each county to initiate those steps of identifying those steering committee members, as well as beginning to facilitate or define a process for facilitating a SWOT analysis within each of those counties. And then the results will be compiled. That's it for my update. There's plenty more work to do, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you might have.
Gunnar, thank you. Any questions or comments for Gunnar? Okay, we'll move on to item 14 is a report from Zach on the transload facility.
Yes, just wanted to give you a real quick update on where we're at with the transload facility. They've been doing a lot of work on site. In fact, they just wrapped up all of their site clearing. So there are a lot of trees and some old pieces of concrete and stuff that they had to clear off the site. And they finished that up at the end of March. April and May, what they've got planned is to do a lot of the grading and site utilities and then prepping the warehouse pad. So that's kind of what they've got on schedule the next couple months here. We're expecting our first reimbursement request from them probably any day now, but certainly sometime in April here, we'll be getting that first reimbursement request from them. Once we receive that, we'll be working with the FRA to make sure we get that first request in accurately and everything they need. And we're expecting that the reimbursement process will be relatively smooth, certainly after that first one. We've also begun working on our next quarterly report, which is due to the FRA on the 30th of this month. We've got a couple of pictures to show you guys from the site. We were sent these pictures from Des Moines Industrial. But as you can see, this one shows the railroad tracks. They're kind of looking out to the west or to the east, that is, and you can see all the trees they've cleared out from there. All along that track before there were trees and a lot of junk and stuff. So they've cleared all that out. And then I believe there's one more image we're going to share with you. You can see here, we've got equipment out on the site, starting to move dirt around. Really excited to see this. You know, this has been a project we've worked on for a long time now. And it's really exciting to actually see equipment out there moving dirt. And, you know, we're going to have our first reimbursement request here soon for those build grant funds. And just exciting news all the way around on the transload facility. I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Zach, thanks. Any questions?
Joe, this is Carl Voss. And maybe this is for Zach. Was there something unexpected with a major water main that needs to be replaced?
Yeah, you know, I think it was unexpected as of a few years ago when we were doing this. They did discover that, I think at least a year ago, they knew that that was there and needed to have some replacement work done. City of Des Moines reps might have more updated information, but my understanding from Des Moines Industrial and our discussion at our call with the FRA a couple weeks ago is that they've gotten that moving, and they believe that that's going to be on schedule and it's not going to interrupt the development of the facility. But I'll let somebody from Des Moines correct me if I'm wrong.
I can speak to that, Zach. Yeah, no, the Des Moines Waterworks has stepped up, and Ted Corrigan has stepped in, and yeah, they're going to get it moved. It shouldn't be a delay at all. So there is a big water main that will get moved. The pipe is all corroded. It needs to be changed out. So that is going to get fixed, and so they will still remain on schedule.
It basically
Thank
runs
you, Joe.
across the middle of this picture here.
Yep. You bet. Any other questions or comments? All right. Item number 15 is report on the Purple Heart Highway update from Todd.
Yeah, thank you. We had a meeting earlier this month with the DOT, had what they're calling their Iowa 5 US 65 task force. So we met with them with a number of other partner agencies and stakeholders. During that meeting, the DOT asked for the MPO to complete an environmental document for the corridor, some design exceptions before the formal request can be made. There was a couple other things that came out of that as well. They also presented a summary document on the corridor and then asked for additional ideas on how to deal with slow moving vehicles, and they're still accepting those ideas. Since then, staff has met with the DOT, Federal Highway, and HNTB. HNTB did the study that we recently completed, and they're going to help and do with these additional documents that the DOT is asking for, and Federal Highway for that matter. The environmental document will be done in-house by the DOT. We believe it'll be a categorical exclusion document since it's already a developed corridor and we're not hitting any right-of-way issues with this project. The other things that we'll be looking at will be the traffic movements, particularly at the major interchanges, but also at the ramp movements, how traffic might affect those. So that'll be part of these additional studies. Some loading on the bridges. We want to make sure the bridges can handle the loads, though I don't really anticipate any issues there as well. A couple other minor things, but we'll bring back that scope of services and an idea for next month.
Customer.
I don't know, Andy, do you want to add anything?
I guess the only thing I had to update was that we are looking to set that second meeting up and had sent out a doodle poll, and it looked like, just short of 30 of the folks, 30 of the 50 some folks had completed that. So I'll be looking today, tomorrow, making sure that folks have done that, and then push out another meeting invite date and work towards, getting some information ready to present there. And a couple items got brought up, such as a timeline of, some of these studies and this process. And that's going to be a good learning curve for me too, because, no one's really gone through this. So it's going to be, good to get those things figured out too, because, like I said, no one at the department, we haven't redesignated anything. So it's really a new process to us. But I think yesterday meeting with the MPO, FHWA, and DOT and the consultant is a good step forward, making sure that what we're trying to provide, for the federal highway is going to be what they need to review and give us our feedback on this redesignation. If you guys have any questions, you can feel free to ask Todd or myself.
Andy, thank you. Any questions or comments for Andy? Andy, just real briefly, if no one else wants to jump in, I was encouraged by the first sentence that came out of, your staff and folks at the Iowa DOT, that they want to see this get done. And then the next 50 minutes was all the reasons that it's not going to get done. So then my excitement left me after the first minute, and it just felt like roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And so, this isn't going to go away, and, we're going to keep working on it. So we're going to need to find solutions together to make it work for everyone. And, constant roadblocks isn't, it's just not going to go away. So we're going to hit it at different angles if that's not going to work. And having 50 people on a meeting on a Zoom call probably isn't the most productive way to get it done. So,
well, and I agree with that, Joe, but when we set this up, I didn't really want to leave anyone out, but, because I think that probably would have caused more concern, but I agree that, in those settings, it's not something you're going to, get in and work on it really hard. So we're going to have to try to come up with a way to make sure it does. But, our first sentence was, we are supportive of this. And, like you said, the next stuff was,
and I appreciate that.
And it's not why it's not, I don't agree that it's not, those are, they're more like hurdles in my opinion, and it's not, the designation can go on even though we noted all those negative things. It's just that we're going to have to make sure that we, figure out a way to accommodate those folks. For instance, the hauling of raw milk. Well, I just noticed that because we review, legislative actions and things like that. And there is a law out there to apparently in the FAST Act, which is the current transportation infrastructure legislation, there was a parameter in there that would allow raw milk because, on the interstate system. It's just Iowa hasn't gotten into that yet. Some of the surrounding states do it. And their reasoning was that, those are not divisible loads. You really can't, you're following, you have one big truck with milk in it going to the creamery or whatever. It's hard to, put that down into smaller trucks. So those are some of the reasons that, and that was the industry that was looking at changing that law. So, that's just one of them. But, we did meet with Polk County just to talk about the old Iowa 46 that went through, just upstream from the existing US 65 bridge or 65 in that area. And, unfortunately, I think that's, if we're gonna, go the route of, providing an alternate route for the tractors, so we don't have them out on the highway, that's gonna be one of the only places, because, talking with Polk County, it was just like, downstream of there, it's all federal land and it's floodplain, and it's tricky. And, and if you get into that,
The alternative route is going to be,
yeah. And, the
alternative
in that
route
meeting,
would
it's
be
going to
way
be, go ahead. We're, interested in helping with that. It's just that it's not going to be an easy task either. So,
Motion's not.
I agree, Joe. It's not going to be easy moving forward, but that sometimes the challenge is good, I think.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I'm up for the challenge, but the alternative route, and you can pass this on, as the alternative route is going to be more of a challenge than giving us the waiver, and you know that it's going to be way too expensive to build another bridge for an alternative route. We need to follow the parameters that have been set in other states. You know, we're looking at 1% of the less than 1% of the traffic for this bypass, and we're going to need the waiver, and we're going to continue down that path. But the alternative route, I don't see that happening. And if that's going to be the sticking point, then there's going to have to be a way around that. And so we'll continue the discussions, and looking forward to it.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
You bet. Anybody else? All right, item 16 is a report on the water trails from Todd.
Yeah, thank you. Continue to work on developing and administering the build grant and the agreements that go on them. Some of the things we'll talk about here is on the status of sub-agreements, the roles and responsibilities under those, how we process change orders, and the overview of the reimbursement process. Some of the things we said we'd bring back from last month. So there's a number of sub-agreements that staff and legal, Scott Brennan is on the call if you have questions for him during this, but we continue to work on them. We have an agreement between the MPO and the DOT. I'll explain that a little more in a minute. There's an agreement between the MPO, Centralized Water Trails in Polk County on the funding and administering the engineering, construction engineering. There's an agreement that'll be developed between the MPO and Des Moines. Des Moines owns the property that we'll need to get a easement to do construction on. So we'll be getting that agreement together with the city staff and bringing that back. And then an agreement with Central Iowa Water Trails in the MPO regarding how the funding will be handled. And I'll talk about that more in a minute as well. So all these agreements are worked on. We did share with you the draft of the agreement between the MPO, Central Iowa Water Trails, and Polk County. That was provided as a supplemental item. Go on the next screen, please. The MPO and the DOT agreement, the build grant actually goes to the DOT, and then the MPO is a sub-recipient of that build grant. We did that to use the DOT's bidding process and procedures. We didn't do it this way. The MPO would have had to develop bidding procedures and processes, and that takes about 2 years to get through federal highway, so we didn't have that amount of time. The MPO, Central Iowa Water Trails in Polk County one, again, just discusses construction management activities and funding. Des Moines and MPO, we'll talk about responsibilities for maintenance as well as the easements. And then the MPO and Central Iowa Water Trails, again, project financing. Next screen. Some of the roles and responsibilities. The DOT's there to ensure that the MPO is following the terms and conditions of the build grant agreement, essentially. They will review the reimbursements requests submitted by the MPO. Once we pay the contractor and get back the proper documentation, we'll submit a reimbursement request up to the DOT, and then they will work with Federal Highway to process that reimbursement request and then send that back to the MPO. Most of that will, almost entirely, all of that will be handled electronically, including the paying of funds back to the MPO. So that helps speed up the project, the process, and I'll touch on that in a minute as well. And next screen. MPO, administered project activities, including those dealing with cost, time, contract requirements, construction quantities and qualities, maintains day-to-day operations, and participates in the decisions for change conditions and scope changes and change orders and such. Next screen. We will review the project data and then also review all the financial processes and do the proper documentation and safeguards to, as the federal.
I don't know who was checking today. I think they've got someone coming in every day to check the part sheet.
Next one.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. I just had a couple
Again, MPO directing the staff, consultants,
So I can tell you.
administration, the contracts with the constructing entity, contractor, submit reimbursements requests on a monthly basis and make sure we're following all those processes. Go ahead in the next one. Polk County will be assisting the MPO with day-to-day oversight of the construction management. So they'll be on site and relay those activities to the MPO on a regular basis. Help the MPO in reviewing invoice and pay items, help ensure that materials meet the Buy America requirements, as well as the Davis-Bacon wage requirements for payroll collection and processing that we have to report back up to the feds. Next one. They will help develop change orders when they occur with the general contractor and present them to the MPO for approval. They will maintain copy of final records and provide those to the MPO, help the audit when the project close out and submit final construction audits to the DOT on our behalf. I should note that the county will, in all likelihood, sub some of that out to a consultant to augment their staff. Now, City of Des Moines, and we're still talking with the city about this, and this is no way final, but we have to work out some way of maintaining the facilities and how that's worked out with Central Iowa Water Trails. But there is a time period the DOT is asking us to maintain the facilities for the build grant. And then Central Iowa Water Trails will provide local match funds to be deposited into an MPO bank account to do the cash flow for the construction project. They will also open a line of credit to help with the cash flow during the project. And when we have large pay items, we can tap into that line of credit. And then those funds will be pulled back into the project account and recirculated once we get the reimbursements back. And then they will provide funds to maintain the in-water features of the project going forward. Next screen. We're going to show you a few flow charts now that were included in your packet. This is the roles and responsibilities. Go to those, Gunnar, if you would, please.
I'm heading there now. It'll take me just a second.
Yep. So these flow charts have been developed and shared with DOT, Federal Highway, a couple other Polk County and city. I've seen some of them. I don't know if they've seen all of them yet, but most of them have. Well, Central Iowa Water Trails. Blow that up a little bit if you could, please. So top of this, that's good. Scroll up just a little bit. Federal Highway is obviously the grantor of the build grant. So we have a build grant agreement with Federal Highway, the DOT, and the MPO. That's been drafted and is pretty close to being done. There's a few tweaks left to do it. As I mentioned, the DOT is considered the recipient in this case, and that was, again, to use their bidding procedures and save us some time there. So there is a sub-agreement between the DOT and the MPO. So the DOT grants the responsibilities onto the MPO as a first-tier sub-recipient. That's the language they use. DOT is responsible for drafting that. They've started, they haven't shared that with us yet, but they wanted to see some of the other agreements first and some of these flow charts that we're sharing with you to help draft that agreement. Bit of a unique project for everyone, so it doesn't fit into all the boxes that they normally use. So underneath the MPO's responsible and charge for the project, so there's about 4 areas that we are responsible for: project financing, construction contract, construction management and maintenance. Under project financing, we'll have an agreement, as I mentioned, with Central Iowa Water Trails to provide the local match funding for the federal grant, and also to handle the line of credit issues. And they are also providing funding for the engineering as well as the construction management activities. So that is starting in draft form. There's the construction contract that will be with the contractor that will be out for bid later this year. Currently, the bid specifications are on the DOT's website for contractors to review and ask questions. That'll go on, I think, into May. And then we'll have a little roundtable with them on where they can ask their questions and then revise anything that we need to on that side of things. Construction management, as I mentioned, Polk County is handling those services for the MPO. They'll report those things back to us. The county, scroll down just a little bit, Gunnar, please. The county will, like I said, most likely contract out with Snyder and Associates to help with that construction management. Snyder's been involved in helping do the design work and manage that process. So it seemed to make sense to continue on the construction side. And then have an agreement with the city of Des Moines on the maintenance requirements and access to the site just for construction. The city is drafting that. And then I believe Pam Cooksey has started thinking about it and drafting pieces of that. Again, taking parts of the other agreements that have been drafted and incorporating some of those pieces in. And then we'll have in some form the Central Iowa Water Trails responsible for maintaining the in-water features. And we're still kind of figuring out this piece with the city, the Central Iowa Water Trails, on how that will be handled. Next flow chart, please. A little bit. There you go. So for the change orders, if contractor comes in that needs a change order, Snyder and Associates will develop that change order with Polk County, and they will submit it to the MPO for review and approval. We'll also share that with Central Iowa Water Trails since they're funding this, but the MPO is the one who has the final review and approval on that. We have a couple ideas on how to handle these based on the kind of a tiered approach on how much the change order is going to cost. And so if a change order is less than 100,000, right here we have that the executive director could approve or not approve the change order. We've also talked about bringing in some other the finance committee or other officers into this process. This isn't by any means final. If it's over 100,000 but less than $1 million, then the MPO executive officers could approve. And then scroll on down. If it's over $1 million, we'd bring it to the whole executive committee for approval of that change order. Then it just goes back up to the contractor and Polk County to administrate the change order. So on to the next one. So this is the reimbursement process. So again, the construction engineer would develop a pay estimate for work completed. The MPO would work with Polk County to review the pay estimate and make sure it's correct and that we have all the proper documentation. If it's not, it goes back up to the construction engineer to work with the contractor to revise it. Assuming everything's correct, scroll down, please. The MPO would approve those pay items and then send them on down to first pay the contractor. We have to do that step first, get the contractor, make sure the contractor deposits the funds in their account and we can prove that they've had that payment in their account. Then we would prepare a build grant reimbursement form and submit that to the DOT. The DOT reviews that request and either approves or not. If not, the DOT would work with the MPO on what items need to be revised or what to clarify and get more documentation on. Assuming they do agree with it, the DOT sends funds to the MPO and the MPO deposits those funds back into the project account. Scroll down just a little bit. Concurrently with that process of if the DOT approves it and deposits the fund in the MPO account, the DOT would send the request for repayment to Federal Highway, and then the DOT would approve it and send funds to the Iowa DOT. So the DOT pays us and the Federal Highway pays the DOT. Once everybody's in agreement, that looks fine. That process will take between 40 to 60 days, depending on how much review and revision is needed. We've set up our accounts so that funds can be electronically deposited from the DOT into the MPO accounts. So that will speed up somewhat, so we're not waiting on a paper check, but the reviews take about that amount of time, hopefully closer to the 40 than the 60. I believe there's one more, Gunnar. Nope, I did. A lot of information to share, and certainly take your time some time to look at those. I'd be happy to answer questions now, or if you want to look at them a little further and send us your comments or give me a call, I'll be happy to take them then as well.
Thanks, Todd. Any comments, questions?
Joe, if I could just real quick, this is Scott in Des Moines.
Yes.
Todd, I really appreciate that you put these illustrations together, because I think we all knew that there was quite a bit to grasp and understand with the different agreements and the flow of the decision making. So thank you for getting us something to get started with and we can review. I think it came out in your conversation, and I see it on the chart here. We're still working through the responsibilities for the in-water features with the water trails. So yeah, that is far from decided at this point. My understanding is that is has been requested that the Central Iowa Water Trails be responsible, and we were waiting to hear from the DOT. Have we heard from them on that aspect?
The DOT's agreeable. They just want some assurances. But they don't know what those are yet. So
right. Okay.
It's been an interesting process with them, since this, again, doesn't fit a lot of their normal, procedures. It's kind of one step forward, two steps back at certain phases, but we're making progress on that. But hopefully we'll have a better answer for you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, because we'll continue to put agreement together on the land-based improvements so we can move that forward quickly.
Sure, no, that's great.
I think the one missing on here too, by the way, is that the local funding agreements will need to be documented as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Scott. Any other questions or comments? All right, Todd, thank you. Very informative. So we'll keep working on that, as Scott said. I know there's a few things with the maintenance that we're going to need to come to an agreement, or the DOT is going to need to give us some answers. So let's move on to item 17, is a legislative update from Dylan.
Thank you. I have a couple things from the federal level and then a quick state level update. So a couple of weeks ago, the Biden administration announced their plan for infrastructure, kind of their stimulus plan. The details are up there on the screen. I won't read everything in detail, but it's a $2 trillion package, 620 billion of which is for transportation. So a lot of this is fix it first, some of the standard stuff, but there are a few new things. Towards the bottom, it talks about 20 billion for equity and access for a new program to reconnect neighborhoods that were traditionally disadvantaged or had a big infrastructure project tear them apart, those types of things. So this still has to work its way through the process, but it's just interesting to see where the administration is thinking. Speaking of that, if we go to the next page, just earlier this week, the new, President Biden's take on Build and Tiger. Each president kind of names it something different. So they have the RAISE program, Rebuilding America and Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. is what that stands for. This is very similar to what Tiger and Build were. Each one kind of puts their own slant on it. Again, this one focuses a little bit more on the racial equity, climate change, and so forth. There's $1 billion available in this next round of funding with a max award of 25 million. A max of 100 million can go to any single state. Applications are due in July. So I know there's some projects probably out there in our area that will be looking for this. So there's the details, the information's out there now for you to see. And then finally, on the next slide is just a quick update on some of the state related legislation that we've been watching. Personal delivery devices. What I heard the other day is this is probably dead for the year. I mean, it's still, if you look at it, it's still alive, but it sounds like it's not going to move forward this year. The automated traffic enforcement devices, that also did not make it through the last funnel. And then we were also looking at one about low-speed electric vehicles. This is still going. It's been amended a little bit to put a cap on the speed limit for certain e-bikes. So that's kind of the update from where it was when we discussed this last time. So that was quick. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, we'll keep you informed as these things move along.
Thanks, Dylan. Any questions? I hear none. We'll move on to item 18 is a report on the MPO certification review update from Todd.
Thank you. Now this is a process we go through every 4 years. We last did it in April of 2017. Our next certification review with FTA and FHWA is scheduled for next week, starting next week, 22nd through the 28th. It will be done virtually. The preliminary findings will be presented at the May meeting, and then a final report will come a couple months after that. With us today is Darla Hugaboom from Federal Highway. She wanted to run through a couple things about what the review, certification review encompasses. So Darla.
Thank you, Todd. So yeah, you guys don't see us that often. So every 4 years we come in to talk to you, to let us know, that we're coming. We have some topical discussions. As Todd said, we do this every 4. This is virtual, so it's much different than last time. It's going to start next Thursday and progress through the following Wednesday. I'll go ahead and mention, if you're interested in attending any of the sessions, go ahead and let myself know or let any of the MPO staff know you're welcome to attend. Next slide. And I'll quickly introduce myself for those of you who don't know. I'm Darla Hugaboom, and I am the current community planner with the Federal Highway Administration, our office here in Iowa. I guess I'm the only one. We've got about 17 staff. The way Federal Highway works is we have an office in every single state. This is a combined process, and so we work cooperatively with FTA to go through the certification process. So my colleague with FTA is also on. So if you want to introduce yourself, Jerry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jerry Doyle. I'm the community planner in Region 7 with FTA. We actually cover Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri, and I'm located in Kansas City, Missouri, but I am your community planner for Iowa and Nebraska.
Thanks, Jerry. Okay, next slide. All right, so, as we said before, we come every 4 years. This is actually, federally required. There is a law and regs related to this that we have to come in and look at your process. It's pretty much what we're looking at is everything that happens in the region that's transportation related. I know a lot of times the MPO will feel like they're in the hot seat, but we're not coming just to look at the MPO. We actually are looking at kind of everybody in the region, how they work together. So that includes the MPO, that includes, transit providers, the DOT, local agencies, public, all of that. So we'll kind of come in and look at the big picture process. You guys are going to be familiar with a lot of the documents that the MPO puts out, and we don't necessarily have approval authority over all of those. So this is kind of, where it all kind of comes together from the federal perspective. Is a lot of that really happens during this, process certification. And then the next bullet was just, we're looking for public comments. That's okay. You can go to the next one. And so from you guys, what we're looking for is to help us get the word out. We'd love to hear from you on how you think things are going in the region. At the very last slide, I think I've got a SurveyMonkey link that we can send out to everybody to get out there if you want to send it out to your own communities. We would love that. We're looking for feedback that you have. If you've been sitting on this committee and you see something that, you've had a great idea about, and something that, maybe you've seen somewhere else that you'd like to see implemented, or something that could be improved, let us know. If we've got something also a process that's working really well, we've got some accolades. We'd also love to hear that, because as we go through, we're not just looking for, the things that are bad, we're also looking for the things that are positive. Next slide. So this officially opens up our comment period for this. It's going to open today, so April 15th, and then we'll close it on June 15th. That's going to be the SurveyMonkey, but we're happy to take comments, by email, through that web link, call me, whatever. We'll take it any way that you're willing to send that through. Next slide. All right, the outcome, as Todd said, there will be a report, and we'll be issuing that 60 to 90 days after we complete all of the discussions that we have next week. There's 3 options, I guess, for how it ends up. You can be certified or certified in 2 different ways with, some things that go along with it. That's pretty unlikely at this point that we would have any corrective actions. I haven't seen anything. We actually do, we call it Stewardship and Oversight, and we have a risk-based process. So, behind the scenes, we kind of pay attention and been looking at all the documents, that the MPO produces up until this point. So when we come in to have the discussions next week, it's really just to kind of clarify and help us understand a little bit more all the stuff that we've already been reviewing. So yeah, we'll be looking at that. As I said, we're not just looking for the bad things. So, the report will also have recommendations and commendations that we would, be reporting back to you guys. Next slide. Right there. So transportation planning process, I think you guys probably already know. I mean, it's basically everything that you guys are all working on right now. So we'll just say officially the process by which transportation decisions are made and projects are planned, selected, and prioritized for implementation within the region. So it's really all of the major planning documents. I mean, we're going to be talking about, how the board is structured, your bylaws, all the agreements that the different agencies have with one another in order to do this process. With the way the federal regulations work is it's not prescriptive in a lot of ways. And so, particularly in planning, there's, it can be done a lot of different ways. You just have to do something. So that's where we really come in and look at, what does your agreement look like? Are you following it? Is it working for you? And all the planning documents that they do. Next slide. All right, and as I said before, we have a lot of stakeholders in this region. So when we talk about the process, it's going to be, basically everyone that's on this committee, as well as the public. Next slide. And these are your major planning documents. I know several of them were mentioned on other items for today. For sure, the public participation plan, we're excited to see a new version of that coming through. So we've been looking at that. Those are the major documents. Okay, next slide. Public comments. These are just some example questions for things we might be looking for. I've already said a few of these. So really it's the big picture stuff. What are, what can we do better? What could be changed, or what's going really well, in the overall process. Next slide. There we are. All right. So the SurveyMonkey link is on the bottom of this that, we can send out. Hopefully staff can get that sent out to all of you. Would love to get feedback from you. You're, happy to say it now if you want to say something, or come to our meetings next week and say something, or, send me an email or give me a call. I'm happy to chat.
We'll send out the link to the SurveyMonkey and Darla's and Jerry's contact info, as well as the meeting links in an email tomorrow.
Awesome. That'd be great.
Thanks, Darla. Thanks, Todd. Any questions or comments for Darla or Todd? All right, we will move on to item 19, report on the Permanent Trail Counter Program update from Saroshi.
Yes, I wanted to give you all some follow-up information regarding the MPO's Permanent Trail Counter Program. So as you all know, the MPO is developing a Permanent Trail Counter Program, which kind of supplements and improves our current Trail Counter Program that we have. And to that end, the MPO is purchasing a few permanent trail counters. So I wanted to share with you a little bit more about these counters and the benefits that they bring. And then I'll also share with you a little bit about the implementation / installation plan for the counters moving forward. So as the name indicates, these are permanent trail counters. They are multi-counters, so they're able to count both pedestrians and cyclists. They provide us counts consistently 24/7, 365 days. So they're taking counts all the time. The data is transmitted remotely. So we do not have to go out in the field every time and collect the counters and bring them back to our computers to download the data. We are essentially having the data transmitted every single day. So it's fairly up to date as far as the trail counts go. They have a much longer battery life compared to the counters that we have right now. And they work in all kinds of weather conditions, whether it's snowing, raining, and that kind of thing. A couple other great advantages to this is that they are very good at taking counts for larger groups. So our current counters tend to undercount a little bit. So if you have a large group of people walking or biking together, essentially it's not able to distinguish the various people in that group. It just takes it as a single count. So these are optimized to be able to count these larger groups, and they work for both paved and unpaved trails. And however, right now we are just looking at paved trails. Next slide. As far as the implementation and installation goes, right now we are focusing on our level 1 regional trail corridors. And you can see in the map here, the brown lines all over the map are our regional trail corridors. We have 8 major trail corridors, and you can kind of tell from the map that it's a hub and spoke system where you have the trails radiating out in all the various directions from our central hub of Des Moines. So our goal here with this, with our initial trail update is to counter update is to try and install a counter in each one of these regional trail corridors. So with that, we would need a minimum of 8 trail counters. Right now, we have budgeted funding for 3 counters. And so it's going to be a phased installation. We'll be looking at installing the first 3, and then we'll be looking at additional counters moving forward. So as you know, these trails are several hundred miles, so we have to figure out exactly which location the counters need to be installed. And so we are relying on our member communities to help us with selecting a site and helping us with the installation. Some of the criteria that we are looking at for selecting the site are historic usage of the trail. So obviously we want to pick a location that's well used. We want to also ensure that it's a good quality site, so it's not prone to frequent flooding and that kind of thing. Also, we want to make sure that it's a local priority. Communities do know where if they were to have a counter, where they would get the most benefit or value out of it. So we want to make sure that we are taking that into consideration as well. So as I mentioned, we are taking an incremental approach. Right now, we are looking at the kind of the northeast quadrant of the metro, if you will. So that includes some of our very popular and highly used trail corridors of High Trestle Trail, the Chautauqua Valley Trail, and the Gailey Wilson Trail. So, so I've been coordinating with the communities to help us identify the specific locations where the counters could go. Following this, we will be moving on to the kind of the northwest quadrant, which would have the Walnut Creek Trail, the Raccoon River Valley Trail, and the Neil Smith Trail. And finally, the southern portion of the metro, which includes the Great Western Trail and the Carl Voss / Somerset and Carlisle Trail. So in a nutshell, very briefly, this is our sort of our installation plan for the counters moving forward. As we continue to refine the locations and identify the spots where we're going to install the counters, we will be happy to come and update you. And if you have any questions on this information, I will be happy to take them at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Roshi, thank you very much. Any questions, comments? We'll move on to item 20. It's a report on US 169 interchange corridor preservation zone from Zach.
Yes, we just wanted to make you aware that the Iowa DOT is looking for public comment on some potential corridor preservation zone around the US 69 interchange near DeSoto on I-80. They're going to be accepting comments through May 17th. We included the letter that the DOT sent to us on page 36 and 37 of the agenda packet. Includes the letter with some additional information as well as a map. So again, just want to make you aware of that public comment period. I don't have anything else unless Andy, you want to add anything regarding this corridor preservation.
Thanks, Zach. I just have a few comments. This is kind of our typical process when we think that in the future we're going to have to make upgrades and we see a lot of development happening. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that stuff can't be developed in this area. It's just that those developments need to kind of give us a review, and you know that gives us opportunity to get with them and let them know what our intentions are here. We don't have anything programmed obviously in this area, but we are knowing that you know the interchange is you know original with the I-80, so at some point it's you know going to get you know be outside of the capacity and the safety that it's needing to provide there. So we've done this to the east of here, and you know, just kind of set up these corridor preservation zones just so we can get a review of what development is going to be happening. So if you guys had any questions, please ask. If not, you know, comments can be submitted online and you can go from there.
Thanks, Andy. Any questions or comments for Zach or Andy? All right, we'll move on to item 21 is a report on upcoming events from Gunner.
Just one to draw to your attention today. Affordable Housing Week starts next week. All sorts of information. I've got a URL here. I think we'll send the link in our follow-up email tomorrow as well. Otherwise, it's pretty easy to find with a simple Google search. This is the 10th anniversary of this event. A lot of good programming. It's all happening virtually.
Thanks, Gunner. Item number 22 is other non-action items of interest to the committee. Todd, do you have anything?
No, sir.
All right. Item 23 is our next meeting date. Meeting date would be May 20th of 2021. I would like to do, we can do a hybrid or in person for whoever wants to come, and we can still do it on Zoom. But I think by May 20th, which is a little over a month, I think we'll have a lot more folks vaccinated, and for folks that want to come, we'll start with the executive meeting. Todd, I think you'll send out an email to see who will participate hybrid or virtually or in person, and we'll move forward to try to get back to some sense of normalcy. And Zoom has been great, but like to see everybody's face.
Yeah, we'll send something out.
All right. With that being said, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's patience. It was a long agenda. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.